Shut up, compressor. Okay, so the putty had about 20 to 24 hours to set up, and I have gone ahead and sanded it down and done a few light passes with the tri-grit stick to kind of polish it up a little bit. So there's the belly, leading edges of the wings, and back here with the tail fillet and this whole area. And it's all looking pretty good. I've also got the tail wheel piece ready to go. And just for shits and giggles, the decals on the crankcase cover, which is a whole different part of this build. Next up, I need to do some seam checks. And the best way to do that is with primer, but I don't want to just brush it on. I don't know. It's hard for me to see from the contrast when it's just like a black line. So we're going to put some Stynol res on the kit, which is why the why the cockpit has been masked off. Okay, we're going to set that aside. Let's do a little bit of testing here. These upper surfaces aren't as much of a concern because they are going to be covered with blue paint. They don't have to be bare metal except for the leading edges. So if things get a little bit wonky, we'll survive. Okay, so priming is done and we're now doing seam checks. And I think that this guy works out pretty well. We're pretty much ready for paint. Also went ahead and got the gear struts did. They are fine. I'm going to need to gloss them up so I can do the oleos and then mask the oleos and then do the rest. Or this might be one where I just give it over to Molotow. Not my general practice, but the oleos on a Park P-47 are very, very, very small. Don't see a whole lot of it. So that's that. Checking out the seams. Looks like we still got a little bit more work to do back here. And I might have to give some of this very, very aft detail where it all comes together. Might have to either give it up or get the scriber out and fight for it a bit more. It's a tough shape though. We'll see. Up front, it looks pretty good. I don't know if I'm seeing this because I got not quite 100% coverage or because there really is something that needs dealing with. It looks like there might be a little tiny crack kind of thing right up here. It's the kind of thing that CA would probably be great for covering up. Looking at the wings, the leading edges, port side looks good. Starboard side looks good. There's a little bit of crud over here on the starboard side that we need to clean up. I'm having a hard time seeing. Let's zoom in a little bit. So right up front there where we've got the line between here and we've got the various fasteners and whatnot, that's probably need a bit of cleanup. I'm trying to figure out what that little divot is for. And then back here on the tail fillet, a little bit more work needs to happen. Not much. I think we can probably CA some of that and do some final sanding work. And we are not too far off from being able to start hurling paint at this guy. Before I do that though, I want to go ahead and add the steel for the fasteners on the crankcase cover. My pardons in advance if there's swearing with part of this. Fuck. The nice thing about this paint is it's fairly fragile. It's fresh, so we can sneak in here. Some of these oops moments that we had, we can just kind of scrape them away. So we're going to do a quick touch up here with some neutral gray and PS770. Good as new. Sweet. Well, we've got the PS770 out. I'm going to go ahead and spray a little bit of MRP zinc chromate. It's a slightly different color than what I used on the gear base, but they're distant enough from each other. I don't think it matters all that much. And a little bit of variety is always fun. Not too shabby. Yeah. Sweet. Okay, for shits and giggles, I've prepared another all-clad wash. Alright, we got that done. Oh, the real fun one. Cool, now we're going to let that set up for a little while. Take that away just a tiny little bit. Okay. Well, I've been doing that thing where I work off camera again, so it's probably worth time for another check-in just to see where things are at. So, starting back here on the aft section of the fuselage behind the cockpit, again, this forward part of the tail fillet insert, it was just a weird ass shape, and it kind of stuck up in a weird way. And so, in addition to the epoxy sculpt in there to kind of smooth it out, I also had to knock down the actual shape itself, and I think we've got it in a pretty good place at the moment. There was some 3M acryl putty in there. There's also some super glue on top of that that got sanded down. Thankfully, checking with some actual plans and whatnot of the P-47, there was not, like a 109, any sort of center seam or panel running along the top of the fuselage back here. It was just round. Now, if Tamiya had seen fit to do all the different rivet lines and stuff, there would be all kinds of rivet lines. There's not actually one dead center, but a bunch of them kind of along the side here. So those aren't there, though. This basically just needs to get knocked down. We don't have to worry about destroying too much detail. There's a little hatch here. There's a little raised doohickey right here, and then there's the little area around the antenna. That's about it. So I think we've got this knocked out. It will take another quick Steinel res check just to make sure, though. Up front, I had a little crisis of faith, I guess you could call it, trying to figure out, what exactly was going on up here. If you look at photos of P-47s, it's actually almost impossible, it seems, to find a good high-res photo of this part of the aircraft, mainly because when it sits on the ground, the cowl and the engine and this forward part of the fuselage are way up in the air, and so getting a good shot of them is not easy. But my main question, and I don't know why these little white bits are stuck in here, my main question, though, is there a panel line here? Because from various inspections, there didn't seem to be, and the way that all these panels lift off, there's not like a central girder in here to support anything. There's just a bunch of accessory packs and shit like that in here. So I finally found a photo, and it did indeed show a line right here with a little hole right in the middle, which is what this thing is that was already there. Pretty cool. The fasteners are still here, but they are very much reduced, which is fine because they aren't all that visible on the actual thing either, compared to the perimeter fasteners that go along the sides and all the way down here and all that. So just a little bit of high Q-tape and a few swipes of this handy RB. I think it's supposed to be technically a saw, but I use this a lot for straight panel lines because it's hard to get it all screwed up when it gets going. So that's looking pretty good. Flop this guy over to the underside, and the underside has been a bit of a fun cleanup. So this stuff all looks a lot nastier than it really is. It's actually very smooth as you go across here. But this is honestly probably the weakest part of the P-47 as a kit. Because you have to join the fuselage halves, you have this part where these different bands of metal come together, and they're great in here, but when you get back here and you have to join it and you have to then rescribe basically this like curving V and curving U shape, it gets a bit dicey. I think I've got it, but again, we need to Steinel res it. And there might be a few rivets missing here, but life will go on. Another fun surprise for me was up here with the centerline sway braces for the drop tanks that could be carried on the centerline there. Now, these did not fit well at all. They seemed almost like they were designed for a 1/55th scale kit or something like that. They were a little bit short, a little bit narrow, all that kind of stuff. And I don't seem to remember them in the past, but then when I went back and looked at Hairless Joe and Magic Carpet, which I built, 8-9 years ago, I guess I wasn't quite as discerning back then. I basically just ignored that and just kind of glued them in. But these I wanted to fix up a little bit better than they are, so we've got some 3M in here. Basically taped it off, shoved the putty in there, used a mix of Q-tips and this awesome silicone brush with Mr. Leveling Thinner to smooth it out, and then just pulled the tape off and let it do its thing. So that's all good. The other thing that I am curious about in here is I had to do some small cleanups in this area, and I think I need to do a little bit more sanding here because I think some of the putty residue kind of ran off. Got a little bit messy right in there, so I'll probably have to hit a whole bunch of this area with steel wool or something like that in there just to get the grimier bits cleared away. Okay, so yeah, that looks pretty good once it gets cleaned up. Now, there was also a little goober up here where it looked like the putty didn't quite catch, and so we had to come in with some super glue. I believe it's this area right up here around the sprue gate. And again, I think it has been vanished. We shall see. Once again, I'm thinking about priming this whole area with, at least in some areas, some Mr. Surfacer 1000, because it is very good at that sort of scratch removal type of job. I might catch some things I don't, mainly because this underside is going to be bare metal and I don't want to take any chances. We've also got, I don't know if I've put this on camera yet or not, the cowl is not only red, it is now red and the sheen has been taken away thanks to some awesome MRP semi-matte varnish. So this stuff right here. Great stuff. Definitely does a good job of getting it to, more of a kind of gloss instead of the super stupid shiny that Gun GX3 can get to. And we'll soon be masking this to paint the black and bare metal on the rest of it, but not quite yet. Next bit of big progress is that the engine is almost done. Basically, this thing was painted with some LP11 back here, a nice sort of brighter silver color to hopefully show up once it goes in the cowl, which it does not. The Edward ignition ring I opted to keep because, I don't know, it does the job and you can't really see very much beyond the crankcase cover no matter what. Crankcase cover got painted, the appropriate gray. It got some silver paint to call out the various fasteners sort of around it. And then it got an all-clad and Tamiya rubber black wash that does a nice job of picking out all those little contours. Next thing for this is going to be weathering it and all that good stuff. But it's kind of funny to see, this little magic trick of just how much these cylinders vanish when they go inside the cowl. So there's application 1, the cowl itself. Application 2, the prop. Boom, everything is gone. And then once this part is silver and the spinner cap is a brighter silver, almost like a chrome, you're going to be hard pressed to see much, if any, detail back in there. Now, as you go sort of offset, the crankcase cover still shows up. So that's where we really want to put the focus, I would say. But yeah, overall, we're getting there. So I think our next project here is to go ahead and do another quick test with Stynylrez and see how the various seams are coming along on this guy. Okay, so it's time to go ahead and mask the cowl so we can spray the flat black and the bare metal. There's just one challenge with these 56 Fighter Group cowls, though. If the red band only went to this forward panel line, that'd be one thing. Dealing with this curve still makes this a challenge to mask, but just dealing with it with a line we already have is nice and easy. Unfortunately, if you look at the way that the band works, it actually extends out into sort of the middle area of the cowl behind the fasteners. So how do we do that? Especially trying to keep it all level all the way around something with as weird ass a shape as this. So you got the weird oval, and you also have the fact that it's a decreasing radius. So extra super fun. Fortunately, and the reason I painted the red first is if you go from the front of the cowl back, it's an increasing radius, which is actually easier to mask and keep a good edge on. So my trick for this, knowing that these things go a little bit beyond the actual fasteners, is to get some 2mm Azu tape. We're just going to place these, oh come on, right here next to the fasteners. What this will do is, as we come around and mask, it will give us that line. Well, these won't. These are spacers to essentially help us find that line. Challenge is going to be underneath here. But I want to see one thing here real fast. This might give us an edge. Challenge with that bottom is it's really curvy there, and anything too long is going to want to bend around the curve, which we don't want it to do. So by placing that literally directly on the panel line, and placing that really hard against it, that gives us that line that we can work from. Then all we do is we move these, and there's our guideline. And there we have it, spacers for cutting off that red stripe. Now, when it comes to masking weird increasing or decreasing radius curves around cowls and fuselages and things like that, my favorite go-to tape is this stuff. This is 3M curve tape for artists or something like that, or artist tape for curves. And even though it basically looks like electrical tape, it's slightly different. There seemed to be some gunk on the it's been a while since I used this shit. There seemed to be a little bit of gunk on it, so I'm going to clear away a strip of it there. Now we want to make sure we have enough to get all the way around this giant pain in the ass. So, look like enough? God, I hope so. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to start this somewhere where we've got a good line that we can get onto. And then, since we've got this super handy guide, basically what you do, you take the tape, you work it around. I'm trying to do this and keep it in camera at the same time. Not the easiest thing. Basically, work it around. I need to see about lifting up this one just a tiny, tiny little bit. There's some a little bit of original sin with Okay, there we go. And then basically you're just using these little pieces of tape as your guide, placing it around. Also, happily, the width worked out that I can kind of use that panel line as another guide. Let's go ahead and get these little strips removed, and then we can start having some fun with paint.